Patsy Rodenburg, welcome to our LinkedIn Live. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I'm so happy to see you, Anna, and I'm so happy to be with you.
Oh, wonderful. If I can just quickly introduce you to our audience, you're a world-famous, world-renowned voice and presence coach, and you've worked with many high-profile business leaders and A-list Hollywood celebrities all around the world. Some of these include Obama, Kate Blanchett, Hugh Jackman, Nicole Kidman. I mean, the list really does go on. But despite having these high-profile relationships with these people, the work that you seem to have been most passionate about over your career has been the work you do with actors. And you've been the head of voice at the prestigious Guildhall in London for many, many years. And the work that you and I've done together over time has really been based on our passion for leadership, and leadership today more specifically, and the need to empower and inspire leaders to find their true and authentic voice so that it can have meaning and have impact. But to start us off, perhaps, Patsy, you could talk to us a little bit about what got you to this point. Why this vocation, and what's your focus now, given your breadth and diverse experience?
Well, I think I became fascinated about the human voice and presence because as a child, I couldn't speak. I've always had a struggle with speech, and consequently, you're sent to work in theatre. I love theatre. I've been in theatre for 45 years, and I was training as an actor, and I needed to make money. So I got a job. I don't know how I got it because I wouldn't get it now. When I was about 22, teaching in top security prisons. Wow. And I started with prisoners, and I suddenly thought, my goodness, they've lost their voice in all sorts of ways. But then I realized that teaching was more important for me than acting. I've been alongside some of the greatest actors. I ran the department at the National Theatre, at the Royal Shakespeare Company, all sorts of things. But my passion has always been to empower people and their voice and their presence. And let's get the really important bit of news out there. The vast majority of people are born with the most amazing voice. The vast majority of people are born with presence because it's how we survive. And for whatever reason, and normally it's trauma and oppression, we lose our natural voices. We lose our natural presence. And of course, technology isn't helping us. And the one thing that we all need is to reconnect to each other and actually tell each other our stories.
Yes.
I'm of the belief that a lot of people know is that the telling of a story is more important than the invention of the wheel or taming of fire, because it tells us not only about ourselves, but our moral code. So fundamentally, I teach people to communicate with presence.
Yes.
And it's all most of the work has come from actors. Leadership, yes. I do, because a lead actor, a really good lead theatre actor, knows all about leadership, how to hold an audience, how to take an audience. So most of the stuff I've taken into your world has come from there.
And it's amazing because when we've spoken about leadership, you've spoken about leaders today, and they've been trained to use, to communicate in certain ways. But so many people haven't had this training, and they know so much. And you're all about helping people who know so much to be able to find their voice and communicate. And we often find in positions of leadership, often they're not genuine communicators. There's not this authenticity that's needed today, and what organizations are looking, and people in organizations are looking for today, which is to have that genuine connection with what leaders are saying. And so what's your experience of working with sort of high profile leaders and helping them find their authentic voice?
Well, let's give it a context here. You see, I think everything I teach, everyone knows. I think I'm teaching ancient wisdom, because in Western civilization, the Greeks devised something called rhetoric, which was only taught to privileged men. Yes. You couldn't have power without using your voice. Now, as I've said, I think everyone has got a fantastic voice, which can be focused and connected to. But at the moment, we have often, look, if you go to certain schools, every day of your life, you speak in public. Every day of your life, you speak to an elder. So you don't have the problems. So you often have leaders who speak well and know nothing. I'm interested in all those people who have a huge amount to say, who can't cope either through fear or stress or feeling that their voice doesn't work. I tell you something very moving that rather breaks my heart. A lot of very brilliant people say to me, I'm much more interesting than I sound. And
Yeah.
of course they're interesting, but the anatomy of the voice has to be understood, because the tensions we carry in our body and our breath systems and our voice stops our presence. And until we're fully present, we can't connect to each other.
Yes. I mean, I recently did some of your training and found it to be so useful and beneficial. And it was the first time that I actually felt fully integrated and connected to my voice. I knew my voice had power, but to be able to really step into it and not feel as though it's separate to you. I often feel maybe it's me as a female leader that sometimes our voices are not heard, and therefore over time you feel separate from your voice. But when we actually stand in our voice and realize how powerful it is, we realize that I've realized how simple and effective it can be in having impact and having leverage. And so I guess this whole idea of empowering the female voice is something that I'm very passionate about. I don't think a lot of women know how powerful their voices really are. And in many ways, some women are actually afraid of their own power. And you've now written or started to write a new book specifically on the women's voice. I'd absolutely love to hear more about that, because I think the time is now that we need to help more women find their voice and help them realize how powerful their voices are.
Well, the book is written. It's called The Woman's Voice. It comes out early next year. Let me just repeat this very critical thing. Every woman has a fantastic voice. Men. It's just that it gets lost. And I suppose one of the reasons it gets lost is that we are told to look as though we're powerful, rather than the outside became more important than the inside. And I suppose the book is about my struggle, because I started teaching before we had legal rights as women. So I've seen the whole, it's very good getting older, because you see a journey. And I have to say two very important things. One of them might be very uncomfortable. I don't feel that we have a chance in saving the planet until we have women leaders. Because I'm not anti-men. I just know that in every organization I work in, women are the ones that have got a lot to say, but often are not heard enough. And I think what happened in the 80s and the 90s, something happened which women were encouraged to think that power was the way they looked. Yes. I feel so sorry for my young students, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, to live with this idea of perfection, that you have to be perfect. So suddenly, to be powerful, you wore high heels. Look, I can teach somebody to use their voice in high heels, but it's much harder, because if you it's all about the body. If you're on high heels, your legs look great, but fundamentally the breath gets tight. The whole critical thing is about the breath powering the voice. The breath also powers the mind and the heart. If you don't breathe, you can't power anything about yourself. If you're in heels, the stomach gets tight, it moves up into the chest gets tight, the larynx gets locked, and it goes up. And suddenly you're speaking up here. And you can't, it's not that you want to speak up there. The anatomy of not knowing how to work in high heels, the voice comes up and never comes down. And for whatever reason, that is it's very hard to listen to. But it started to get wobbly, I think, for women in the late 80s, 90s, for whatever reason. And I trace that in the book a bit. But there are amazing women out there. And it doesn't take a huge amount of work if you just begin to understand it. The boring bit about my work is that you have to do a bit of repetition every day and you have to prepare. But every great speaker has to prepare. They have to know how to warm up and prepare. But of course, I've always supported male leaders, but I think it's critical at this moment that women come forth.
Yes, absolutely. And some of the work that we've spoken about and the work I've done with female leaders is, doing this deeper work around how they can become more impactful as leaders, and how important that is to be done in the presence of men. We often see so many of these women's groups that are that are created exclusively for women. But could you talk more about your ideas around why it's important for women to be able to find their voice in the presence of men?
Well, I think I was naive in the 70s that I thought that men would want women with power, but of course a lot do, but a lot don't. And I think the hard things you have to face as a woman, that maybe, I know men have to face this, but let's just think about some of the things that women historically have been taught. You have to be liked. Women are told again and again, you have to be liked. But actually, if you want to be liked, you often lose your presence because you have to put a mask on. You can't speak the truth. And I think the other thing that women are facing all the time is that you have to face that you're not going to have unsympathetic, you're going to have unsympathetic listeners. You've got to face that you're not going to be liked, and the people that are going to need communicating with, they're looking for you to get something wrong. You see, I work in organizations and men don't get criticized as much as women.
Yes.
Everything that you do is looked at. Every leader faces that. I mean, and women find this very hard, the next thing. Everything you do as a leader is observed. And if you haven't had the chance to be in that arena, that's a very hard thing, to make eye contact. Women find these things much harder than men. But it's all possible, and it's critical. I think it is critical.
So there's a lot more preparation that women need to do in order to be able to.
Yes, it's not complex. It starts with very simple things. How to stay present.
Yeah.
Over the years, I've devised something called the 3 circles of energy, which is basically when I'm present with you and you're present with me, we're with each other and we're looking at each other and listening and we're giving and taking. The thing that is making society crumble is that nobody's listening to each other anymore. All they do is shout at each other. So dialogue and debate. But when we're present, we have a chance to have dialogue. We have to be very centered in our bodies. That's the natural position of the body. We shouldn't be pulling our bodies back. The 3 circles of energy that I've been working on for over 40 years, I talk about first circle, which is when you're pulling your energy in so that your breath gets tight and your body starts to be imploding, so, and your voice falls back. So some people say, I don't know why people aren't listening to me, because that, and in fact, you're pulling your voice in, and that's first circle. So often first circle, this is a huge generalization, but a lot of women are first circle. They're often great listeners, but we can't hear them. Second circle is what I call presence, but the third circle is where a lot of men go, which is pushing out, being too loud, talking but not listening. And women, I watched them in the 80s and 90s try to take on male habits and go into third and be too loud and pushing. And we just have to return to ourselves, which is our authentic, connected selves. And that means a bit of body work to understand where our tensions are. If I say to people listening, or I say often, when you're uncomfortable, you have huge clues as to what tensions are stopping you. Next time the the person you can't bear walks into the room, just notice what happens to you. Chances are you stop breathing, so your power stops, or you tighten your shoulders, or you look away. Just find out where your tensions are that make you uncomfortable. And that's what you might have to work. And this work then goes into the breath. Where do I breathe? I want to breathe very low. If you hold your stomach, which is what we're all taught to do, you can't breathe properly, and you can't use your voice. So you have to understand these things. And by the way, things go wrong. Things go wrong. You know, something goes wrong, you can release the tension and return yourself to your power. So we start at very simple, practical things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's often difficult for women. We often have this ideal vision of how we need to present, as you say, and how we need to look when we're communicating. And it's what you just said then is just being able to, in the moment, adjust yourself and stay connected to your present, to your breath. And that's certainly what I've taken away from your work. The practical tips is keep your breath down. And you've got some excellent insight into how to project your voice as well, using different sounds. And so what you teach is quite simple, but it's not always easy, for women to notice within themselves when they have these tensions. But that's an excellent piece of advice, I think, is just to notice when those tensions in your body come up. And I do, yeah.
Sorry, but I think, sorry, Anna, but I think what's great about the theatre world that I work in all the time is that we do talk about fear. We talk about stress, because actors face that on stage every night. So it's an open conversation. And sometimes just with women, and maybe women need to work together for a bit to reconnect themselves before they go into places that make them more vulnerable. Just to admit that you're scared is sometimes very useful, because then you can actually start dealing with the tensions. I had a woman say to me in New York a few weeks ago, "You have no idea how savage this place is." And I think that is a beginning of actually saying to yourself, I find being in the room with these people, you might have to be in the room, you do have to be, but you mustn't let it implode or destroy your body or your breath or your voice. And these things are daily practices. You never get to the free, you have to always work at these things, because again, as you get more power, as you get more leadership, people are going to want to attack you. Guys, we had this conversation and you looked at me at one point. I said, well, in my experience of working in groups and teams, and I do all sorts of teams, as you know, if you've got 20 people in the room, 3 of them don't want it to work.
Yes.
You don't, and because I've worked with so many groups, I think I hold a safe space, and you have to deal with it. But leadership is a constant. You have to address leadership as a leader every moment of the day. You have to look at things. And my thing in the theatre, of course, is Shakespeare and classical, what is called classical plays. And these plays talk about power all the time. And again, we don't talk really about power. The great debates in Shakespeare about power and love. On one side, you mustn't misuse your power, but you have to use it. And a lot of companies fall very slowly because the leader isn't using their power. So again, that's a balance between being too abusive of power, but also not wanting to use it. And again, women fall into that category. They don't want to have to say to someone, "Why do you interrupt me?" Very simple things. Or if you've got somebody in a team, you've got to say, "Don't interrupt this person." That's leadership is controlling the room, and then of course controlling the room so the room can take over their own control.
Exactly. It's so interesting because so many people in positions of leadership are so focused on what they need to say versus how they work with the people in the room to build that dialogue. I often see that in the work that I do, that the leaders of the CEO or the leader of a particular function or group, they're not even comfortable in their own leadership, and they don't get how important it is to have a role in facilitating dialogue. I mean, I walked into an organization, and I love your 3 circles of energy. And I walked into an organization a few weeks ago, and it was a very masculine culture. So there was a lot of 3rd circle energy, and it actually took the women about a day and a half to find safety in that 3rd circle energy to be able to speak. And that's a day and a half of missed opportunity, because, and I often give your advice to women to find what they need to say early, because it's when they can speak early that they can break down that 3rd circle culture. And they actually have a really important role to play in ensuring that the conversation does end up being in that 2nd circle connected dialogue. But yeah, it's an interesting one, because so many women, as they're sitting in this 3rd circle culture, this energy, it makes them become even more. They stay in their 1st circle for a longer period of time, and it's important for them to figure out how to break that, I think, early on.
Well, it's back. This is back to presence, isn't it? It's about daring to come in with presence, to look around. I mean, this sounds counterintuitive. If you walk into a space and you look around and you make eye contact with people, you calm down. Every woman I work with say, no, it gets worse. I said, no, try it. If you look around and you look at people, very, it doesn't have to be aggressive, but you look around the space, you calm down, and the people in the space know that they're there. That sounds ridiculous. But sooner rather than later is a very common mantra I say, not only to women, but people who are there in a meeting, that they're needed there, that they don't believe they should be there, but if you're asked to a meeting, you're needed. So maybe you sometimes have to prepare what you feel you should say at that meeting. You shouldn't leave the meeting going, I haven't said that bit, because you'll find that next meeting somebody will tell the group your idea and get rewarded for it. You have to practice out aloud. It sounds so obvious. I was very lucky when I was young. I taught a woman called Lady Mary Soames, and she became quite a friend. She was Winston Churchill's youngest daughter. Okay. And she talked about Papa. He made a couple of speeches that saved Europe, really. But she would say to me, before these great speeches, she could hear him walking up and down, practicing them aloud. You can't, I meet these amazing brains with such incredible knowledge, but it won't come out until you know how to breathe and use your voice and practice. You practice out aloud, and if it means that you know what you should say, get into the meeting. Get in, because after a while they forget you're there.
Yes,
you just forget you're there, and that you're just sitting there, and you're not contributing, although you're thinking and you're getting nervous. Keep breathing. And I've got lots of tricks, but
you do. And that's why we can't wait to read the book. It'll be full of everything that we need to really practice this work. And I guess my next question, and I know we running out of time now, but one of my real another area of passion for me is how we help men help women, and because there are a lot of great men out there that do
absolutely
want to see
enlightened men. Absolutely. Do you know, I do an exercise. I don't know if you've seen it, but I call forth the good men in a group, because basically most human beings are decent. I believe that. There's only a couple in a group that often wants to destroy it. The bullies, the people who don't want constructive, creative conversation. But the men can actually help the women, and the women can ask for their help. We're allowed to do that in life. We're allowed to say, I mean, I've had moments when, of course, people get angry with you if you're asking them to reveal and be vulnerable, really. But men, there are lots of men want to help, but I think there's been something. I haven't thought this through fully enough, but I do think men have stepped back to help women. And then, in fact, what a very famous warrior said to me once, he talked about the boy men. The boy men are the third circle men who are the bullies, and not all men are, as we know. But the men who've stepped back have wanted the women, is an act of generosity to the women. But in fact, what has taken over is in the playground are the bullies. Two or three only.
Mm. And this is a big issue, and something we've spoken about at length, is that in any group, but more specifically in executive groups, that there are usually one or two, generally male leaders, who have this need to bring the organization down through their behavior, or really. So I guess we called it the destructive crisis that's happening in leadership today. And so how do you protect yourself from these people who do want to go out of their way to bully you or stop you from finding your voice? Because that's really where they come from. Their whole idea is to not have people speak and be free in their expression.
Let's go back to speak sooner rather than later. It's not rocket science. You know when something's going wrong, and then because you're decent, you think, oh, I'll just ignore it and it will go away. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. And then what happens, and I learned this in my early teaching, I would say to myself, that person is really trying to destroy the class. I'll just let it hang, it'll go away. And then it wouldn't go away, and it would fester in me, and suddenly it would come out inappropriately. So whenever anything annoys me, and I think you've seen me do it, Anna, I will say, what did you say? Without pressure, without aggression, and I enter a dialogue. And that's what being a present leader, you have to do. What do you mean? Why did you just say that to that person? Or why have you just said that? And you do it, and everyone then knows that That's a great thing in a group, when a group knows that the leader knows what's going on.
Yes.
They know that everybody knows, and you don't. But if you do it, if you wait too long, you just get it. It all comes out in the most awful, aggressive way. As opposed to, as soon as I was coaching a woman the other day, very top lady. I said, this person is interrupting you, and she said, I know. And I said, so next time you just say very calmly, well, let me finish. I can't tell you exactly what to say, but it's got to be very light and very clear and very obvious. Let me finish. And if they don't, then everyone sees that they're. But generally, yes, I've worked in top security prisons, and I've seen sociopaths, and they don't, because they're out to get you, whatever. But most people are not really like that.
Yes.
So you just have to be courageous and say, just ask, start a dialogue, really. I had a very funny class a few weeks ago with top women in a top bank.
Yes.
I had one guy that is a bully, and he was moving too close to them. He was moving too close, and I said to them, step back. And they said, no, we can't do that. And I said, yes, you can. He's entered your space. He's overbearing you. He's pushing his energy on you. Step back. And they were all equal. They weren't. He wasn't. Even if he was their boss, they should do it. I said, how does he know? How does he know unless we indicate? I just have to step back. You're too close. I'll step back. I think that's a sort of critical thing, that also when we're not in our power and presence, we are desensitized. Some people don't know they're doing it until somebody tells them, or step back. And they all phoned me a few days later, and they said it worked. He just suddenly realized that he was too close. But we often know something so deeply, we forget to tell people who don't know it. We don't.
It's incredible what that can do to a dynamic of a team.
Absolutely.
It can absolutely empower the whole team, because I think you're right. Often, if men are overpowering a conversation, they just need to be told. They just need to be reminded. And like you say, it's women's responsibility to be able to just say that in a calm and kind way. And when that happens, there's just this wonderful equal energy in the room that's really aligned, and you get a sense that everyone would much prefer to be in that space rather than men being more overpowering and women not. For the most part, from my experience, that's what I'm seeing with organizations, with groups that I work with.
And what a waste of a life that you go into rooms or you go to work dreading it.
Exactly.
This cannot be good for anybody. No. I mean, it's a miserable exit. You know, who you might be paid a huge amount of money, but how miserable. And that these things can be communicated. And it's about the group. I just want to remind people that the word civilization fundamentally means that the individual is important, but the group is more important. Absolutely. And that's what we've lost. My students say to me, I teach them Renaissance and, the Age of Reason. What are we going to be called long after I'm dead? What will this period be called? Will it be called the Age of Narcissism? And nobody wants to live in that world because we all need each other. There isn't one organization that wouldn't improve if teams were stronger, communities were stronger, more connected. And there's only one way you can be in a team. Everyone has to be present with each other and respect each other.
Absolutely. Respect. And like you said earlier on, the power of story, being able to share each other's story and connect with each other's story.
And that's when we touch each other's humanity.
Absolutely. Oh, Patsy, thank you so much for this. We're so excited to see your new book. All your other books are available too. They continue to sell, and they're in the hands of thousands of actors and leaders on the planet. Your work is very powerful, and it's certainly a privilege to be able to work alongside you when we have those opportunities. Thank you for an empowering conversation.
My pleasure, and thank you so much, Anna.